Situation in Syria. The United Nations says it's ready to resume aid deliveries in the country. It suspended all deliveries after Monday's air attack on a convoy of trucks carrying food to the besieged city of Aleppo, in which 20 people were killed. The announcement came shortly after the US and Russia traded diplomatic blows at a UN crisis meeting. Well, let's speak now to the former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, who joins us now live from Prestbury in Cheshire. Good to talk to you, Mr. Ford. I just wanted to, during your time in Syria, can you describe what the country was like compared to what it is like now from the footage that you see on the television?
Well, the first thing to say is that what you see on television is misleading about the broader picture in Syria. Believe it or not, there are big swathes of the country where life goes on more or less as normal. In the downtown of Damascus and even the downtown of western Aleppo, there are pavement cafes with people supping cups of Turkish coffee. But overall, of course, the picture is dreadful, hideous, the amount of suffering. But let us not be confused by the inevitable media coverage of all the things that are wrong in Syria.
How do you feel the West has handled President Assad over the last few years? Do you think that he's been handled in the right way?
No, very badly. I see that our dear new Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, before he became a minister, wrote newspaper articles calling for us to do business with Assad. Well, now he's changed his tune, and it seems that he has been successfully groomed by my former colleagues, Smoothies, in the Foreign Office, and he now toes the line saying that Assad must go. The British government's policy, although they disguise it with euphemisms, is regime change. They call it by this euphemism transition, but that is what it means. Our country is working actively for the overthrow of a secular regime in the Middle East that has never done Britain any harm, and on the contrary is fighting against the common foe of Islamic State. We are muddling through, just following on the coattails of the Americans.
But Assad's actions against IS don't also hide the fact that he has also killed a huge number of his own civilians.
Indeed, there have been civilian sides. I'm afraid the media generally don't cover the suffering in government-controlled areas, but it is at least as great as the suffering in places eastern Aleppo. There is a western Aleppo where you could get harrowing pictures, but
I'm awfully sorry about that. As you can see, we had some real technical difficulties talking to Peter Ford, the former British ambassador to Syria. Interesting conversation to have with him. We'll try and re-establish that line if we can, so our apologies about that. Well, a short while ago we were affected by the technology, but he's stayed with us. Thanks very much for that. Live from Prestbury in Cheshire. We were talking about how the best way is to deal with President Assad, and I was making the point to you that he's killed many people in his own country, far more people than IS has killed. Why should the West engage in dialogue with him?
Well, because it's a choice of two evils, and the lesser evil is Assad, quite simply. You have a choice between a secular government that's never been a threat to this country or the West, which protects Christians and other minorities, which protects the rights of women, and which doesn't behead people. And on the other side, you have jihadis, some of whom, it has to be said, the British government is supporting. The British government refused to give a list of the groups that they're supporting with taxpayers' money to the tune of millions of pounds, as was illustrated in the recent House of Commons Defence Committee report. This is documented, and they refused to give the names precisely because they know that some of those groups are extremely dangerous, and they are all, virtually without exception, Islamist who want Sharia law all over Syria. It's a choice of the lesser evil, but it's a no-brainer. Let's engage our brains here. We should not be on the same side as Al-Qaeda. Many of the groups that we're supporting work hand in glove with Al-Qaeda, and that is why the ceasefire has broken down, because these groups are refusing to disengage from their allies in Al-Qaeda. They have therefore committed most in fact, of the violations of the ceasefire, and it's quite possible that it was they who were responsible for the firing, the bombing of the convoy.
You say we shouldn't be on the side that's fighting Al-Qaeda, but should we be on the side of a man who's dropping chlorine bombs on children in Aleppo?
I'm not saying we should be on the government side, but I'm saying we should not be on the side of the Islamist opposition. We are proactively using our taxpayer millions of pounds to try to undermine a secular regime. We should back off, stop interfering, and encourage our Western allies and the Gulf countries also to back off. The Syrian conflict will not come to an end while it's being fueled from outside by, on the Western side, obviously America, the Gulf countries, ourselves, France, and on the other side, the Russians and the Iranians. The foreigners have got to butt out of Syria and leave it to the Syrians. But we continue to try to meddle, as we did in Iraq and Libya, and we saw what happened.
The justification for meddling, though, is what we see is happening in Syria, and that we shouldn't just stand by and allow these kind of atrocities to happen.
No, we need to step up our diplomatic efforts, but for that we need to speak to more than one side. We don't engage at all with the Syrian government. We make no attempt to treat them as human beings. Even with Zimbabwe, we say you have to engage with Mugabe, but the same logic we don't follow in Syria. It doesn't add up. No, what we're doing is simply kowtowing, as usual, to America. We've become the amen corner to America and would not dare to go against their diktat.
So should we be backing Russia and helping President Assad?
Not actively helping, but as I said, to stop undermining the secular government of Syria, which has never done anything against this country and which has the only boots on the ground who are trying to fight ISIS. Don't forget that just 4 days ago, the Americans and ourselves contrived in a massive cock-up to bomb the Syrian army just while it was fighting ISIS in the city of Deir ez-Zor. Okay, we say it was a mistake, but this just symbolizes the muddle that we've got ourselves into.
What about boots on the ground in terms of the neighbouring countries? We have provided air support already to attacks in the north of the country. Do you think we should be providing boots on the ground in Iraq? My instinct is that you're going to say no.
Iraq is a different case altogether. In Iraq, we're working with an elected government, which has broad international backing and where the enemy is clear. The situation is much simpler and clear-cut. Syria is a big mess, as anybody can see. We're dabbling in it. We're making it worse. We have no clear way forward. But by propping up the Islamist opposition, we're not defending the interests of this country. On the contrary.
Peter Ford, former British ambassador to Syria. Interesting to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at the weather now.